Well, it's a complicated thing to talk about, and there have been debates even among people on the left who normally rally to the to try to prevent or stop wars, because in this case we have a situation where, first of all, we don't know exactly who's responsible for this. At least we don't know with any kind of certainty. Obviously, the media are telling us that Osama bin Laden and his network of operatives are responsible, and that may well be the case. But we don't know exactly what the facts are. So it's hard to say, what exactly the causes of this are when we don't even know the perpetrators. But having said that, I do think that there's obviously an effort by a lot of people in the media, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier about the kind of pre-existing agenda of a lot of people in the media regarding foreign policy. This played right into the arguments of people who have always said that we ought to step up our for example, our military policy against Iraq, or we ought to step up our support for Israel's military. And part of that rhetorical campaign is to say that these attacks, these terrible things that have been done, are the consequence of Islam, and political Islam in the Muslim world and the Arab world. And in some sense, even though one rarely will find somebody willing to come out and say this, the strong implication is that the Arab world or the Muslim world at large is responsible for this. And yet, what's amazing is that even when you look at the reactions of people in the Arab and the Muslim world to what happened, it is so difficult to find people in any kind of a responsible position, even people who have relative what we in the States and what certainly the media portrays as very extremist views. It's almost impossible to find somebody who's willing to say this was a good attack, I approve of this is a good thing. We hear again and again from people who consider themselves Islamic militants and activists in their own countries, whether it be Egypt or Saudi Arabia or wherever, saying, I have to condemn this kind of attack because it's un-Islamic, to kill innocents. And I think that points to the fact that there does exist, even among people with different political ideas, a certain basic core of principles that you don't kill innocent civilians. However able people are to kind of rationalize their positions, people like Bill O'Reilly on TV, where he's saying we should go in and starve the populations. Even he had to stop for a second and say, of course we shouldn't target civilians. It's very difficult to find people who are willing to support what was done. But it's also true that in the eyes of the U.S. government, which is, and the policymakers who are sitting around in Washington trying to plan their responses to these attacks, it really doesn't make much difference whether an individual or a group or a government actually supports what happened in the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. It doesn't make much difference at all, because there is this larger movement of political Islam that U.S. policymakers are concerned about and are opposed to, and have for years been trying to take steps to suppress. And the reasons for that have very little to do with democracy or freedom or the rule of law or things like that. And you can see that most clearly in the countries where those militants are most active. I mean, there are countries like Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Jordan, where the official governments are completely undemocratic, and yet they're supported to the hilt by the United States, which gives them huge amounts of weaponry and aid, military and civilian aid. And it's the Islamic opposition movements that are trying to overturn those governments, or at least to gain some influence in them. And they're the ones who are always trying to win more influence in the government for parliament, for elected parliaments, and for constitutional reforms. How some of these people have relatively moderate theological and political views, and some have more extreme views. But it's ironic that these are the really in some ways the enemies of U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, and yet they're the ones who are trying to reform extremely undemocratic secular regimes in the Middle East. That's something that you're not seeing in the media, and it's certainly not something that you're going to see in a speech by President Bush in front of Congress. In reading about how Bush prepared that speech to Congress, it was interesting that one theme that he told his speechwriters he wanted to be discussed was, why do they hate us? and try to give an answer to that so that he can explain to the American people why this attack happened. And the words that the speechwriters came up with, you saw very clearly. It was, they hate us because we're good. And obviously nobody thinks that way. Even people who are evil don't think that they're going to attack the enemy because the enemy is good. And certainly the broader movements, Islamic movements in the Arab and the Muslim world, certainly don't think that. And if anything, condemn the United States because they feel that the U.S. is supporting undemocratic regimes in those countries and is not respecting human rights when they support Israel's military, when they support repressive regimes in the Gulf. So that is one aspect of the rhetoric where you really have to examine reality apart from how our political leaders and our media pundits are presenting the situation.